Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode in our Media Climate Network podcast series, where we are highlighting contributors to this special climate journalism education edition of the Journal of the Association for Journalism Education. The series is dedicated to exploring how educators, researchers, and practitioners across the globe are rethinking journalism training to better address the climate crisis. In this episode, we are joined by Ivan from Uganda. He co authored an insightful piece titled A Spark of Interest and Empowerment, an assessment of climate change journalism training initiatives by local media support organization. We'll be diving into how local training efforts are shaping climate journalism in Uganda, what's working, what challenges remain, and how these insights might inform broader journalism education. Dear Ivan, thank you for joining us. To begin, could you briefly introduce yourself and tell our viewers a little about your background in journalism education and research?
Okay, thank you, Saqib. My name is Ivan Lukanda. I am a senior lecturer in the Department of Journalism and Communication at Makerere University. I have worked as a freelance journalist before joining the academia more than 10 years ago.
Right. Thank you, Ivan, for joining us. So, your article explores climate journalism training efforts by local media support organizations in Uganda. Could you walk us through what this study was about and what motivated you to focus on this area?
Okay, thank you, Saqib. Journalism is slightly new to climate change, and climate change is also slightly new to journalism. It's very hard for anyone to claim complete knowledge about climate change. So when we are training students in journalism, we don't necessarily train them in climate change communication because the focus is not climate change communication. So that means that you need another way of training people so that the message about the environment can be delivered. And that's why my colleague, Dr. Gerard Warulia, and I decided that we should focus on how local journalism training organizations have been equipping our journalists with the ability to cover the environment.
Right. Thank you so much. So, if you could briefly talk about what kind of climate journalism training programs were you looking at in this study and how helpful they were in terms of enhancing the capacity of the journalists?
Yeah, so the program we decided to focus on the Africa Center for Media Excellence, ACME, because ACME had run two programs. Those programs were sponsored by the European Union, and one of those programs was done during COVID, and the other shortly after COVID. So the programs brought journalists from different parts of Uganda. We looked at studies that were existing regarding journalism education in Uganda, and we discovered that most of them were looking at journalism education from the university side, but they were not looking at journalism education from the side of the media support organizations. So by looking at this study, we were able to talk to people who had attended university, who had been taught how to cover stories professionally, but were also able to talk to people who had not been to university, but were doing journalism. So that gave us a blend in terms of those who had been trained at university, but also people who are working in the city, in the capital, in Kampala, but those who are working in places such as Arua, Kabale, towns that are really very far away. So you have a journalist working in the rural area and a journalist working in an urban area coming together. A journalist who has been trained at university and a journalist who has not been trained at university, but they have the experience of working in a certain local area.
Right. Thank you, Ivan. So, Ivan, with all that training and capacity building, even then there are times when the editors are not very interested in climate stories, in publishing those climate stories. And the article also talked about that and highlighted that how sometimes the editors are not willing to publish the climate stories. So, what do you think? What can be done to change that?
A number of things, like you've noted in our article, we observe that it's not really the shortage of stories necessarily. Sometimes, even when the stories are done, the stories may not be published. It means that when you train a journalist, you also need to train an editor. If the editor is not trained, then they'll find it hard to understand a story that has been done by a journalist. So we think that senior people, editors, should also be brought on board during the training. And the importance of bringing the senior people on board is that we know that editors are major gatekeepers regarding what should be published and what should not be published. So if an editor fully understands what climate change is and why it should be covered in the media, then it becomes easy for that editor to accept the story, but also becomes easy for that editor to assign a journalist to go and do a certain story. If the editor understands the area, they can also suggest what the journalist can focus on. So that means that if you have a senior person who has been trained in covering environment and climate change, that person is able to mentor others
Right.
to continue covering this area. And in this paper, we emphasize the importance of mentorship as much as we emphasize the importance of training senior people to be able to take decisions that can enable stories regarding climate change to be published.
Right. These are very good suggestions, Ivan. I was about to ask the Ugandan media scenario. So, with that, what do you think? The media in Uganda is giving enough attention to climate change now, or is it still a challenge to get these stories published?
I think that given the circumstances
Mhm.
and from the stories which the journalists we talked to shared, there has been an increase in the number of stories. For instance, the journalists who are working in northwestern, or what we call the West Nile region of Uganda, told us about how they've been covering a certain forest that is under danger from people who make charcoal. So that forest has of recent received a lot of coverage. We've also seen a number of stories regarding moving away from the use of charcoal to use to use gas as a form of energy that can be used in cooking specifically. We've seen stories regarding the protection of the shea nut butter tree. It's also located in northern Uganda. And we've also seen several stories talking about destruction of infrastructure, especially when there is flooding. Those stories being linked to climate change.
Mhm.
So I think that there's been an increase in number of stories change.
Mhm.
So I think that there's been an increase.
Right. Thank you so much, Ivan. So, Ivan, your study mentions both the opportunities and challenges in these training efforts that we've been talking about. I would like to ask you, what do you think makes a training truly effective?
We think that because climate change issues keep evolving, then it becomes very necessary to have something that is sustainable. But sustainability in this case can only come if training is adapted. The training content is adapted to the needs of the different regions. Because climate change differs from from region to region. If it's a farming region, then they will experience they will feel climate change differently. If it's a grazing area, they will feel climate change differently. If it's a city, if it's a rural area, the way a student experiences climate change different from the way a farmer experiences climate change. The way a road constructor experiences climate change is different from the way a politician experiences climate change. So we think that if in this case, if climate change can be done based at regional level, because in this case, the training we were assessing was focused at national level. So, and we think that training can be taken to the different regions so that journalists are able to share how they experience climate change in those regions and how they cover it for them to have context. We also think that technology, the way we are talking now, using Zoom and other technologies, can still be used in training to enable as many journalists as possible to access these trainings, whether they are done in Uganda or they are done abroad. Certainly, every training will add something small to a journalist or to someone, and knowledge is acquired in many cases in small bits. So it is cumulative. So the more that trainings, the better. The other thing that can be done is for this training to be a little longer, because sometimes the content is quite a lot. So if the training is 2-3 days or a week, then the journalists will still be struggling to try and understand a few concepts in climate change, and then the training has to end. So that makes it an issue.
So I've been looking at your research. What's that one insight or takeaway that you think journalism educators and media support organizations should keep in mind?
I think that journalism educators should keep in mind the fact that journalism curricula cannot address all the issues of climate change, as those issues keep changing. They should also keep in mind that when you're doing climate change training, it is a struggle find trainers, since it's very hard to find someone who has studied journalism, but they've also studied environment and climate change at advanced levels. So that makes it hard to balance the theory and the practice at the same time. Yet, it's also important that through trainings such as these, journalists are able to get knowledge, but they're also able to network and know, if I'm to do a story that is that's a national story about climate change, who can I call in the north? Who can I call in the west? Who can I call in the east, so that we can do this story?
Thank you so much, Ivan, for sharing your time and insights with us. All of this discussion and your research reminds us how vital thoughtful training and local support systems are to empowering journalists and bringing environmental stories to life, especially in underrepresented contexts. Thank you for your time, Ivan. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Saqib. Thank you so much for interviewing me.
Thank you, everyone. This conversation is part of our special podcast series from the MediaClimate Network, celebrating contributors to the Journal of the Association for Journalism Education's Climate Journalism Education Edition. If you have enjoyed this episode, Please subscribe and explore more conversations with scholars and educators rethinking journalism for the climate crisis. Until next time, stay engaged, stay informed, and keep listening to stories that move the climate conversation forward. Thank you.